Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel, and welcome to the third and final video of my crochet color changing series. In part 1 we went over how to use the cut and tie color changing method. In part 2 we went over how to use the intarsia method, and in part 3 we're going to be talking about the tapestry crochet color changing method. I left the tapestry method for last because it's probably the most well-known method of the color changing methods, and I thought it would be a great way to wrap up the series. I will leave a link to part 1 and part 2 of this series in the description box below for anyone who may have missed it. And without further ado, let's get into the video. Okay, so just to give a brief description on the tapestry crochet method, it's the process of color changing by carrying the yarn through the project. Meaning instead of cutting off the non-working yarn and dropping it in place, you're carrying the non-working yarn through the project by crocheting over the working yarn. This is definitely the fastest of the color changing methods in my opinion because you're able to change colors in place and keep going pretty quickly. There's no messing around with bobbins or cutting and tying off the yarn. But with that being said, because you're carrying the yarn through the project, you do have to be mindful of the non-working color peeking through. You also have to be mindful of your tensions because it's really easy to have uneven tension throughout the project. If you aren't keeping up with the non-working yarn, keeping it nice and taut when you're working through. Like I mentioned in my last video, any of these techniques covered in this series can be combined and used in the same project. I have multiple different uses for all of the color changing methods. I'll mix and match them depending on what project I'm working on, so I'll just use the method that fits the project the best, or that I feel the most comfortable with and I feel like is the most useful, I guess. But I do want to say, don't be discouraged if one or none of these methods work for you. With anything, practice makes perfect, and everything takes time to learn. When you take the time to learn a new skill, you are going to have a better chance of perfecting it and getting used to it and it becoming a routine. So please don't feel discouraged if you don't get it right away, because you will get it. I promise you. You just have to keep practicing and keep working at it. But now that we've covered what the tapestry method is, let's go ahead and move on to how to use this method. Okay, so to show you how to use the tapestry crochet method, I'm going to be working through a swatch of a plaid design that I've used in past patterns. For this swatch, I will be working with 2 colors at a time, but you are more than welcome to work with as many colors as you feel comfortable with. I do suggest using no more than 3 colors, 4 if you're using a lighter weight yarn, because it can get really crowded in there and it can cause some bubbling of your project, and like I said previously, it could cause some of the non-working colors to start peeking through. So I definitely suggest working with as least amount of colors as possible when using this method. If you're working with more than 3 or 4 colors, I would definitely suggest using one of the other methods that we covered in this series. But before we get started, I am going to start on the right side, but I do want to show you the wrong side first, just so I can show you how I attach the colors for each of the rows. So I work the color repeat for 4 rows, so every 4 rows I'm having to reattach a new color. The gray is repeating through the project, so I don't ever have to tie off that color. I just carry it up through the pattern. But with this taupe and this cream color, I do have to add it on. I've added it on in 2 different ways. Down here I have added the taupe color or the cream color, or is it taupe? I think it's the taupe. I added the taupe color by just tying it on to the working yarn. So I only have 1 tail here because I didn't cut off the working yarn. I just simply tied on the taupe to the working yarn and continued through. And also another way of doing it that I've done here, because I'm changed to the cream color in this next row here, for the last 4 rows of this gray color, I actually dropped the taupe color here because that was the last stitch that I was going to need the taupe color for before the next color change. I actually worked over the cream color for 4 rows in order to be able to change that color from the gray to the cream in this last stitch here. So it really just depends on your preference, if you'd rather tie it on or just leave a loose tail. Either way, you're going to have to weave them in at the end. And one way doesn't make it more difficult for weaving in than the other. So it really just depends on your preference. But I'm going to go ahead and get started and show you the method. For this tutorial, I'm only going to be using the gray and the cream. I just wanted to keep the taupe run so you could see what colors I was using. Okay, let's get started. So I'm going to begin by chaining one. I'm going to be working the last 2 rows of this color change. So I'm going to be working with the cream and the gray. So I'm just going to be chaining 1 and turning. And as you can see, for the first 4 stitches, I'm not having to carry that gray color because I just dropped it where it is. It's another method of, or another way or an example of using 2 different color changing methods in the same project. By dropping the yarn, it's technically considered intarsia, but because there's really no use for me to bring it through this cream color and then back up around. I just drop it where it is and then pick it up where I left off or where I need to pick up the color again. So for this pattern, we're just going to be working 4 stitches of each color. So I'm going to start by working the first 4 cream. All right, and just like every other color change, we are going to do an uncompleted single crochet. And then we're going to drop that yarn. We're not going to drop it entirely. We're just going to move it to the side. And then we're going to pick up the next color, which is this gray color. We're going to finish the stitch. And then we're going to continue working with that gray color, but we're going to be working over this cream color. So we're just going to hold it right behind that row that we're working on. Insert the hook through the stitch and underneath that cream, yarn over, pull up that gray color, and then yarn over and finish the stitch. And that is literally all the tapestry crochet method is you're just working over the non-working yarn and you carry the color through the project. Just a little tip right off the bat, to make sure you have a nice seamless color change here, you want to make sure that you're giving that non-working yarn a nice tug, just to make sure everything is nice and tight in here and you're not having any bulging or any kind of peeking through or bleeding of the non-working yarn back here. With these 2 colors, I really don't have that problem because they're both fairly light colors. Sometimes you can see this gray color through the cream, but majority of the time you can because I keep my non-working yarn nice and tight. So we are coming up on the next color change again. So we're going to do an uncompleted single crochet with the gray. We're going to drop that stitch. And I'm also going to take this opportunity to give you another tip. When doing tapestry crochet, it is a little bit easy to get all tangled with all of your yarns. So just like intarsia, you definitely want to try to keep things as organized as possible. So when you're dropping yarn, you want to drop it in the direction that your skeins or your balls are in, just to make sure they don't get all knotted and tangled up in the process. Because it can be really annoying, especially when you're working with 3 or 4 colors and you're having to constantly move things around because things are getting tangled and knotted and you don't know where they're coming from anymore. Trust me, I have done that a million times. It is so irritating. But we're just going to go ahead and finish that gray stitch with the cream and then move on to working the next 4 cream. And again, we're going to be working over that gray color, finishing this stitch. And I don't know if you can see that, but here it's a little loose where we did that color change. So I'm just going to give that a nice little tug just to make sure everything is nice and tight. And we're just going to finish out the cream and then change colors again. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and complete this row and I will be right back to show you the wrong side. finish the right side, I'm going to go ahead and chain 1 and turn to the wrong side. And here I just like to flip-flop my yarn just to make sure they are nice and organized. Actually, we'll bring this around like this. See, it just takes a little bit of maneuvering just to get everything in a place that is comfortable for you and that is functional. Take a little bit yarn. Okay, so for the wrong side, this process is literally exactly the same. The only thing different that I do personally is instead of bringing the yarn backwards here, you're going to want to bring it forwards and work over, under and over the non-working yarn with it pulled towards the front. That just ensures or makes it a little bit easier to work through, for one, but two, it also I don't know how to say this. My vocabulary is not great. I'm so sorry. It ensures that the color won't bleed through on the other side, because if you worked with the yarn in the back like this, there is a higher possibility that you're going to get some colors bleeding through. So for that reason, you're going to want to work on the side that is facing you. All right, and I did notice, I did make not a mistake, because this isn't how I prefer to work this pattern, but I'm kind of glad I did it, so I'm able to show you. I could have dropped this cream color here and just worked the gray, chained and turned, worked the gray, and then picked up the cream, but I worked over the cream by accident. I wasn't paying attention, but this is just a good opportunity to show you how to carry the yarn all throughout the project, or where you won't drop anything. You're just going to continue carrying the color. So all you're going to have to do is, this is just an easier way for me to do it, but I wrap the non-working yarn around my hook like this, so up on top, and then I insert that the hook into that first stitch, and then complete that first stitch, and then give that a little bit of a tug. And you can see there, you can see a little bit of a line from where that cream color is, but it's a little bit easier to keep control of when you do it that way, when you go to turn and start a new row. So like I said, you're just gonna keep working exactly like you did on the right side, but you're gonna hold the non-working yarn in the front instead of the back. So we're gonna come up on our first color change, do an unfinished single crochet, drop that gray, pick up the cream, and then make sure you're bringing that gray color back in front, and then insert your hook into that first cream color, yarn over and pull, and just like the right side, you want to give that non-working yarn a little bit of a tug just to make sure everything is nice and tight and neat. Then we're going to continue on working with that yarn in the front. Coming up on our next color change, do an unfinished or an uncompleted single crochet, drop that cream, pick up the gray, make sure that non-working yarn is in the front facing you, insert that hook into the first stitch, complete it, and give that non-working yarn a nice tug. And that is pretty much it for the tapestry crochet method. Like I said, there are pros and cons to this method, you know, really depending on what kind of project you are working on. For me, whenever I work with plaid, this is the easiest and the most beneficial crochet technique to use for me, because if I were to use like intarsia, which would also be a great alternative to this too, but because I'm having to change different colors every 4 rows, it would take a little bit of time. There would be a lot of loose ends to weave in, and nobody has time for that. I hate weaving in ends, and I'm sure I'm not alone in that. But it's just easier to do it this way, to just carry the colors through. But yeah, there's going to be pros and cons to each of the crochet color changing techniques that we worked through through this series, but you just have to work with each one to see which one feels the most comfortable for you, which one works best with the project you're currently working on. You know, if you're doing a lot of color changes, not only doing a few, working with 2 colors, working with 4 or more, you know, it really just depends on the project and your comfortability. And yeah, I think that's it. Thank you so much for watching my crochet color changing series. If these videos were helpful to you, please give them a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and don't forget to hit that notification bell so you are notified when I upload a new video. If you would like to follow me on social media and see what I'm up to and what projects I have coming up, I will leave all those links in the description box. And if you have any questions or ideas for future videos, please feel free to leave those down in the comments below. And I will see everyone in my next video. Bye.